The voice that seemed distant started getting closer, and he started feeling nauseous and tired. The only saving grace this time around, he felt something. He tried moving, but his body felt sluggish. He could barely wiggle his finger. He moved. Master Roland moved. Oh, thank the Gi gods. He felt sick, like he was having a really bad case of the flu. His head was spinning and his body felt heavy. Did I survive those trucks? Is someone called Roland with me in here? Is this the hospital? He couldn't see well. His eyes felt just as heavy as his body. He forced them open. They took a while to focus. The blurry world started taking shape, and he saw an unfamiliar-looking wooden ceiling. That looks shabby. Am I in some kind of shed or something? Read latest novels at nuvielpin.com. He finally saw the woman that was previously shouting. She looked like an older lady. Her body was somewhat wrinkled up. The thing that caught his eye the most was what she was wearing. Is that a maid uniform? She was wearing the whole shebang. A black dress, a white apron, and a cap of some sort that was holding her hair. He felt something cool be placed on his forehead, which was a damp cloth that this lady placed. From the looks of it, he was still alive but ended up in someone's house instead of a hospital. The strange thing was that the lady looked kind of big. Was she over 2 meters tall or something? The bed he was in also seemed to be uncharacteristically large compared to his body. The problem wasn't with the furniture or the old woman though. As he leaned down, he noticed that his body looked a lot different than before. For one, he was a lot shorter. He felt really weak and couldn't move. The woman that looked like a Victorian maid tended to his sick body. Not long after, some kind of old man walked into the room. He looked to be some kind of physician, but for some reason he didn't even give him an examination. He just stared at him while holding onto a monocle. Wait, why is that monocle glowing? Man harumphed while turning to the maid that was standing in the corner, visible concern on her face. Why did you call me here? He is fine. His status is already recovering. Don't call me for trivial things. I need to tend to the other young masters. The old man shouted at the maid as if she did something wrong. The old woman just bowed and took the verbal abuse, but the moment he left, her face looked a lot brighter. Thank the gods, young master, you had me worried sick. She smiled while replacing the damp wet cloth for a new one. She didn't stay there for long though, saying that he should sleep for now, and that she would be back in a couple of hours to check on him. After the coast was clear, Roland managed to raise his upper body. He looked at his hands. They were soft and small. His body looked thick and slightly malnourished, but that wasn't the main problem here. What is this? Did I become a kid? Everything in this room wasn't big, he just was small. He had turned into a child for some reason. Wait, am I really this Roland? What is this? What's going on? Who is Tist? Where is Tess? Why status is recovering? While he was desperately clamoring for answers in his head, something happened. A screen popped up in front of his face. His eyes bulged wide as he started reading what was written there. This wasn't all. The moment the window popped up, he felt information rushing into his brain. It was as if thousands of needles poking his head. The information that he was receiving concerned the boy named Roland Arden that he was occupying the body of. So that's how it is. Roland kept looking at the status window. He was someone versed in computers, so he knew what those meant. Am I stuck in some kind of game world? Did someone put me into virtual reality? He pinched himself to see if he was feeling any pain, and to no surprise he did. Did I really die? Is this the afterlife? He was shocked. Not too long ago he was tinkering in the computer repair shop, and now he woke up in a young boy's body. He even knew who this child was as he regained all of his memories and what the child knew about this world. The place he was in was called the Kingdom of Calderis, and he was the 4th son from the House of Arden. His new father was a baron, and he was the youngest son. Besides that, he even had 2 sisters, one being younger than him. This kid. His family doesn't really think much of him, does he? It looked at the shabby room he was in. He knew from his memories that he wasn't really in contention for the noble title of this house. This honor belonged to the firstborn. Maybe the secondborn still had a shot at it if he was especially talented. But he was only the 4th in line. Unless all of his brothers died, he had no chance. He wasn't sure what this boy's fate would be in the eyes of his family. He was too young to know how the political structure in this world worked. He only knew that he was the son of a noble, so it was probably still better than being a commoner. I should be safe here for the time. Not sure what the age of adulthood in this world is, but the bigger question is. He looked to the hovering window in front of his face. It looked like some kind of status screen of an RPG character. It had things like strength and endurance, just like in games that he used to play. Most of his stats were low, but some of them stood out. My intelligence is quite high, so is my willpower and dexterity. Aren't the first two mage stats? He needed more information first. He needed to figure this status screen out. This was something that the people living in this world saw as natural. The boy's memories reflected that as he could recall him using it. Okay, I need to think status and it should show up. He strained his thoughts, the game-like screen appearing in front of him again. He could see all of his main stats. If he guided his gaze to the desired option, he could even get some flavor text to give him an explanation. He started reading the short explanations for the attributes and looked at his own to see what he was good and bad at. Most of his stats were quite low, but some were uncharacteristically high compared to the others. For one, his intelligence stat was really high at a whopping 35, followed by willpower 18 and then dexterity at 15. Intelligence increases my mana and magic attack. Am I a mage or something? I'm resistant to status effect and good with my hands? Besides those three, everything else was below 10. He had no idea how the stats of an average person's in this world looked like. He tried recalling something from the memories that he got from this child, but there was nothing concerning this. The boy left a boring life without anyone really telling him anything. This was due to how low his social standing was in this family. He was the lowly fourth son, and he wasn't even the child of the main wife, but came from a mistress that wasn't even allowed to live together with him at this estate. He tried recalling how the boy's mother looked, a face or even the shape, but he couldn't. Don't think he ever saw his mother. He tried thinking about what kind of world he was in now. There was a window in his room, but he was still feeling sickly. By the looks of the doctor and the maid, he was somewhere where the technological advancement wasn't that great. Great. How am I supposed to live without the internet now? He became dejected. All those shows and movies that he was eagerly waiting to devour in his free time were all gone now. What was he even supposed to do here? Go to school like a normal kid and then become some kind of court official? Is that even an option? My status is fairly low. Won't they just toss me out or tell me to go join the army or something? He wasn't sure how things worked. From his internet knowledge, he knew that noble sons sometimes became servants of higher nobles. Some were even forced to join the clergy to become a monk. I don't want to shave my head, or be forced to take some vows. He moved his attention back to his status. Did it always look like this? He tried recalling the memories of the boy that had previously looked at his own attributes. I'm sure those three stats were lower, though his intelligence was above 10 from the start. He had somehow influenced these stats, but what was the reason? He decided to investigate and looked at his status screen again. What is that? There is a skill menu. He willed the skill menu to open. With some mental gymnastics, he managed to bring out the window. This one showed him all the skills and traits that he had. Increased proficiency in the creation and repair of various components. Bonus to dexterity 5, used for identifying and analyzing the world, allows you to sense mana. Roland's eyes went wide. He didn't expect to find so many various skills in there. He knew that most of those weren't in here before. This also explained why he had an increase in stats. Most of those passive skills and traits increase my intelligence, willpower, and dexterity. The traits and skills that were there before he got here were fast learning, knowledge retention, identify, and mana sense. He could also recall that this kid read a lot of books in his past time, though that probably had to do with the fact that there was nothing else for him to do besides that. Those nights I spend playing games must count for that sleep resistance passive. Okay, so why am I here? Did I overwrite this brat's brain, or did he die and then my soul jumped in, or something? He tried recalling why the boy was sick. The moment he did, he got a slight headache. He recalled that the boy was trying to do something. He managed to see some kind of glowing mist in the air, and he tried to somehow absorb it into his body. Then something went wrong and he got sick. Didn't that doctor say something about my status already recovering? He looked at his status screen again. The moment he thought about it, the window expanded and showed him a new part. Sickness? Why are there question marks there? Do you need some kind of knowledge to see what it actually is? He squinted and concentrated on the question marks, but nothing changed. He did have some kind of identification skill, but maybe it wasn't high enough, being only at 1 Albanian lek. Well, he got sick after that glowing mist entered his body. Does it have something to do with that mana sense skill? I sure have a huge amount of MP compared to everything else. This was a really odd situation to be in. He thought of what happened that night. 2 murder trucks turned him into a bloody pancake, and now he ended up in some place with a game system. From the kid's memories, he was sure that he wasn't the only one with this system. Everyone had it with them since birth. The rest was unclear, as no one really explained much to this child. This was probably also why he suffered some kind of backlash from absorbing that glowing mist. New Enzerovel chapters are published on Enzerovolts, albine.com. While he was at it, he looked at his stats and then compared the bonuses from the passive skills that he was receiving. Most of his intelligence came from his passives and traits. If he removed them all, then he would end up with 11. Still over 10, though. Is that even a lot for a 5-year-old? Still, with those 2 traits that he had, it would put his int at. Maybe his weak body couldn't handle the excess mana? He started doing some mathematics in his brain, trying to count how much his stats affected his HP and MP. It didn't take him too long to figure out that he gained 10 MP for every 1 intelligence, and 4 MP for every point in willpower. The surprising thing came afterwards, as after he was done with his calculations. What? The sounds belonged to a woman, and she sounded quite gentle. He looked around to see if someone came into this room, but there was no one to be seen. So, I've gained a new skill. He checked the description, but it didn't say much besides it being an indicator that he knew mathematics. It didn't even increase his intelligence stat at all. Guess you don't get stat bonuses for every skill? He had no reference point. The boy's memories didn't answer many questions about these skills. The identify skill was something that apparently showed up after time passes. Maybe it was something everyone had? He really needed more information about his situation, but he was only a 5-year-old child that wasn't taken seriously around here. Maybe that maid will answer some questions? He thought back to the old lady that showed concern when tending to him. Her name was Martha, and from the looks of things, she was the only person that tended to the young boy's needs. He had a vivid image in his mind of the woman bringing him food, helping him put on clothes, or cleaning around the room that he spent the most time in. He remembered something. There was a certain book that the youth was reading before succumbing to the sickness. In the corner, there was a large desk with a chair. Some old cushions were placed there by the maid so that the boy didn't feel uncomfortable while reading. There was a pile of books there, and one, in particular, was the one he was interested in. Think I feel better now. Should be able to move. He wasn't sure if it was due to his willpower stat that supposedly helped with status effects, but he was feeling better with each passing moment. He wiggled down his bed and moved over to the desk which had the book in question. The Basics of Magic. So, he started learning this and something went wrong. That's harsh. He thought back to the poor child. He was more or less abandoned by his family. The doctor was too late to save him. He might have even been too lazy to bother by how he acted when he saw him recovering. He left the book on the desk and moved to the sole window that was right next to it. He peeked outside and noticed that there were some people there. They looked to be working the field. Some kind of plow was attached to a farm animal. Is that an ox? Why is it so big, and why does it have 3 horns? He was clearly not on Earth anymore. The farmer there was using the large animal to help him plow the field. He could see other people walking around, even some in not-so-well-kept armor. While he was preoccupied with sneaking glances outside the window, the door opened up. Martha returned to check up on the boy. Master Roland! You shouldn't be out of bed. Here, I brought you some porridge. The man in the child's body looked at the smiling woman. He wanted to speak up but decided on just nodding and going back to bed. This will take some time getting used to. Young master, it's time. The new Roland felt nervous for some reason. He had a hard time remembering the Baron's face. The man didn't really visit him that often. The last time he saw him was on the boy's 4th birthday. On the fifth one he didn't even receive a present from him, just a quiet party with his maid that brought him some cake. This is going to be awkward. Do I need to call that guy father? Will he hit me if I annoy him? He was sure that he was the lowest-ranked person from the whole family, and he remembered that his older brothers didn't take him seriously either. He had to do it though, so he followed after his maid that guided him to the dining room. Are we going to eat dinner together or something? He racked his brain. He couldn't remember the last time Roland was invited to dine with his family. He mostly spent his days alone in his room reading books and dreaming about fun and adventure like any young boy his age. His maid stopped before the door to the dining room. She smiled at him but knew that she wasn't allowed to go any further. I will see you later, young master. He nodded and entered the room. Inside he saw a large table. Servants were bringing in food and drinks alike. Some of his brothers were already here, like the third son Robert. The youth was 8 years old, and the moment their eyes met he scoffed as if Roland wasn't supposed to be here. Robert, just as him, was someone that came from a commoner, but his mother was a mistress that was still living in this house. Thanks to this he still had a measure of respect. Roland just stood there for now, as he wasn't sure if he was allowed to take a seat before the Baron arrived. Edwin, the second son, and Rainer, the firstborn son, arrived soon afterward. Besides them, there was his older sister Sophia and Diana, that was the younger one. That Baron sure likes to party. 6 kids already, might be more on the way. Edwin and Rainer were sons from the main wife along with Sophia, the first daughter. Diana along with Robert came from the second wife, also known as the mistress. From Roland's reasoning, the first wife probably got older and the Baron switched to the younger version while making more kids along the way. I see being a noble has its perks. Roland wasn't someone who was very experienced with women. He had a fling with 2 back in his college days, but after he started working he had a long dry spell. The Baron and his wives arrived soon afterward, Tabitha, the first wife, and Francine, the second one, and the mistress. The Baron looked to be a big man. He had a nice gentleman-like mustache, and a large scar running down from his left eyebrow all the way to his lip. He exuded a certain aura of a warrior. The noble clothes that he was wearing couldn't hide all the muscles underneath all too well. Damn, my dad is jacked. Everyone waited for the Baron to arrive. He sat at center stage, and then one by one, starting from the main wife, everyone sat down. Roland was sure to follow everyone's example and sit the furthest back right next to the third son. He could see the snarky 8-year-old glaring at him the moment he did that. "What you staring at, you little shit?" was the thing he wanted to shout out, but he remained quiet. Would be best if he didn't have to talk with anyone in here. The Baron was quiet and everyone just waited for him to start eating. The food on the table didn't taste all that great. The cuisine on Earth was a lot better compared to this bland meat they were having. "Rainer, how is your sword training going?" the Baron asked. "My basic sword mastery is already at level 6, father." The Baron started asking his kids about skills and the progress in their training. Apparently they were training and unlocking skills. They even mentioned the warrior class and something about it being tier 1. He wasn't sure what this meant as he himself didn't have anything like a class. While he was digesting the new information and trying not to stand out, he heard his father call out to him. "Roland." He flinched and looked up. Everyone was looking at him for some reason. It was more a look of surprise, some of his family members almost having forgotten that they had a 5-year-old sibling. "The doctor said that you contacted the mana sickness, also you saw some glowing mist, is that right?" "Glowing mist? Did Martha rat me out?" Yes, father?" He tried imitating his older brothers but stuttered slightly. Thankfully the buff-looking man didn't seem to mind it that much. "Mana sickness? Do you perhaps have a mana-related skill?" His father looked at him. Everyone else did the same as they waited for a reply. "Yes, I have the mana sense skill." "What?" the oldest brother shouted out while looking at Roland, his eyes squinting. "What you staring at me like that for? I'm just answering the questions here." "Ho, mana sense. You're not lying to me, are you?" The Baron gave Roland an intense stare. The boy shrunk down as he felt as if he was getting rocks piled up on him. "No, I have it." He spoke out in a meek voice while the Baron rubbed his chin. "Is that SSO Adam?" He could see the other kids, and even the wives, looking at him. It was as if he was doing something out of line, but they were afraid to speak up while the Baron was talking. A man with gray hair stepped out. He was wearing a black tux. If the boy has the mana sense skill we need to check, bring someone who can perform a test. If he passes, look into procuring a tutor and some books related to magic. Roland looked at the large man that was asking the butler-looking fellow for some test. Was he about to get a magic teacher? Was it going to be that easy? He expected to have to scrape by being unnoticed, but here he was getting some preferential treatment out of nowhere. Was mana sense some rare skill? He could tell that his siblings weren't happy with this. Their expressions were easy to read as they were kids that weren't able to hide their emotions. Roland, on the other hand, was all smiles, just nodding while his baron of a father continued to talk. Maybe I'm some kind of genius? Am I a wizard now? In the end, the baron found out that Roland was spending his time working at the forge. He was forced to abandon his smithing testing after they proved ineffective. He was also forbidden from doing tasks like this as they were unfitting of a noble's son. Time moved on. Roland kept training his basic skills to their maximum while trying not to die from boredom. Doing repeatable tasks like this just to hear the system ding wasn't as rewarding as one might think. Then his 9th birthday came. He didn't receive any presents though, he got something else entirely. Roland looked at the sharp object in his hand. It was a short sword fashioned out of steel. He was about 140 centimeters now, quite tall for a 9-year-old child. He glanced at the weapon he was holding, his identifying skill even giving him some basics. Yeah, that helps a lot. Why was he holding a weapon for killing people, you might ask? Also, why was he in a dim-lit room with a green-looking creature looking at him with those beady eyes? The baron liked to keep his boys on a tight leash. He was just 1 year short of receiving his ascension. The House of Arden had a tradition, a very bloody one. Children that reached the age of 9 were to take a certain test of bravery. He was taken to the mansion's dungeon. In there he was presented his opponent. This was something commonly seen in these kinds of fantasy worlds, but for Roland, this was a first. The people around here were all humans. If he didn't see this creature today, he might have believed that they were the only race around. There it was, green and ugly, and even shorter than him at about 120 centimeters of height. It looked angry and was holding a short blade similar to his, just a lot rustier. In comparison, after 4 years of grueling training, his stats went up by a bit. He only had his HP to compare. His was higher, so he had to have higher vitality and endurance than this creature. Vitality gave most health points, while endurance was mostly for stamina but also rewarded some points to it. Roland, what are you looking at? Focus on your enemy. The voice came from the side. It was the same man that was responsible for his training. He was large and bald, scars all over his body. The baron was busy this day but decided that it shouldn't be postponed, so he was here without his parent. In his mind, this was a trivial matter, and just like the other sons, he should be able to push through this little test. Wish that ridiculous int stat that I have could be used for something. He had 3 stats over 20. Dexterity was the only one that was helpful for this occasion, but it was mostly archery focused or for light blades like a rapier. The creature in front of him gave out a high-pitched screech and charged at him without waiting for him to get comfortable. It knew that this was a life or death encounter, and it would show no mercy to its opponent. Roland was startled by the shout, but luckily his high willpower let him keep a mostly clear head in this bout. Get a grip. You trained for this. The man inhabiting the youth's body would be a bit over 30 years of age at this point. Still, he was never in a death battle before, so he was quite nervous. There was no strategy to the way this monster acted. It just charged at him with its weapon in hand. It delivered an overhead chop that could be easily read, prompting Roland to dodge to the side. This was a good chance to retaliate. He swung his short sword at the creature but faltered at the last second. He didn't put all of his weight into it. This resulted in a shallow cut to the goblin's arm. The monster swung back randomly, managing to deliver a cut to the boy's side. What are you doing? Go for the throat! Roland backed away, sweat running down his forehead. Luckily, he was wearing some leather armor that managed to protect him from the brunt of the attack. The bladed weapon of the green monster was of lower quality, so thanks to this he was spared from bleeding. Still, it hurt and would probably leave behind a nasty bruise. His own attack was quite shallow as well, resulting in a similar 10 horsepower's decrease to the goblin's health pool. The wound wasn't deep enough to cause a bleeding effect to go through, and the goblin screamed out again while charging. The creature seemed to go into some kind of berserk state, its eyes went red, and it started swinging its blade around like a maniac. In the face of danger, Roland's mind went blank momentarily, and he started backing away. "What are you doing? It's only a small goblin!" The man kept insulting him. He wanted to go over there and give him a slap. He might have been an adult on the inside, but this man thought he was a 9-year-old child. He was still shouting and edging him to face the monster head-on. "Should have given me a shield, you prick!" The egging worked. Roland gritted his teeth and dived forward. His opponent was weaker, had no training, and was slower. Between the random slashes, Roland saw his chance and jabbed his short sword into the creature's shoulder, jumping back the moment it tried to hit back. This was a massive hit as the goblin's HP dropped by 50 points, and it only had half of its health left. The monster screamed out, but this time around Roland was unaffected. The monster didn't relent and continued charging like an idiot. He took his time and just kept countering, finally ending it with a killing blow to the monster's neck. It dropped almost instantly. Black blood gushed out of its body. He felt a strange tingling feeling like something wanted to enter his body. The strange phenomenon stopped almost instantly, as if being blocked by something. This feeling was the act of gaining experience, which was blocked due to this world's restrictions. This experience couldn't actually be used for now, as he needed an actual class. Any experience gained before the ascension ritual would be added later on, but with a penalty. From the books, people speculated that this was put in place to prevent people from having kids kill monsters before the ascension. Roland looked down. The stench this monster was giving off was making him nauseous. He managed to power through it and not vomit. His only reward for killing this monster was smacked to the back of his head. His so-called teacher berated him for doing badly, and not being able to just overpower a weak-level goblin that had no skill at fighting. Roland was far too tired to respond to this and just nodded. His 9th birthday ended with a blast, with him killing a humanoid creature followed by some nightmares. More time passed, and finally, the day was close, the day of becoming a mighty mage. On. The moment the VR headset was strapped in, something happened. He expected to actually see some instructions while getting a regular VR experience, but instead, he found himself in a strange white room. There is nothing here. He couldn't feel that he was wearing a VR headset anymore, and couldn't take it off. It was as if he dived into the Matrix. He looked around while wondering what he was supposed to do. After some seconds, the whole place flickered and the scenery changed. Wait. Is that me? The white room switched to a grassy plain. There was a wooden training dummy standing in one spot, and opposite it was a person. This person looked like Roland. He was wearing a mage robe and his facial expression was non-existent. His copy raised his hand upwards and held his palm towards the training dummy. Roland had his mana sense skill maxed out, so he noticed the change in mana around that person. The Roland clone opened up his mouth. Some words escaped its mouth. He stared at the talking person and he noticed the shift of mana around the clone. The mana moved through its body and towards its palm, and something started forming. A small ball of energy was created. This ball gradually increased in size before it was shot forward. The wooden dummy received the hit, the wood splintering to the sides as if it was hit by a small cannonball. Whoa, was that magic? His copy didn't say anything but dropped its hand down and then turned to face him. The Roland copy had a blank expression and then started slowly walking towards him. This put the original Roland at attention. What was this clone of him trying to do? Wait. He tried backing off, but his back hit some kind of invisible wall. Out of surprise, he turned around and tried hitting it with his fist. His sudden opponent didn't stop though and continued walking. Hey, you think I'm afraid of you? Roland took a fighting stance. He went through 5 years of training and knew basic hand-to-hand combat as well. He decided to take the offensive, thinking that his opponent wouldn't have enough time to react. But his punch didn't hit anything but air. It literally went through his copy's head. What is this? The clone was apparently immaterial or a hologram. The moment it touched Roland's body, it faded away. this wasn't the end as Roland felt a sharp pain. His head felt like it was getting a needle stuck into it. He heard the familiar voice announce that he had changed classes while the pain was subsiding. He shook his head and could feel that he had learned an actual spell and had his stats slightly raised. The skills he gained helped him in shaping spells and regulating the mana inside of his body. He wanted to test his newfound skills out, but before he could do that, the space he was in started flickering. He wasn't sure if it was due to a time limit or if after a class up you got kicked out. Everything went dark once more, and he found himself falling into the darkness again. He gasped out as he found himself back in the Arden estate, the servants looking at him from the sides. "Were you successful, Master Roland? Did you receive the mage class?" He grasped his head for a moment. The crystal that he was holding previously had turned into dust. He nodded while rubbing his head and slowly moved off the ground. "Yes, I even learned the mana bolt spell." He smirked as he had achieved what he had set out to. No one in this family could deny him anymore. He could go to a prestigious academy and learn magic now. His life looked bright, and if he studied hard he could go far. "Congratulations, Master, but let us test your elemental affinities before we inform the Lord." Roland snapped out of his daydream and looked at Adam the butler. "Ah yes, the elemental affinities, I forgot to check them." The servant moved over with a large glass orb. Roland placed his hand on the measuring device, not thinking anything of it. His affinities would decide what elements he was best at. This was nothing more than a formality, but would show him which element he should focus on. He didn't need much. Any kind of number would let him advance further, so he wasn't worried. The orb glowed slightly, but nothing out of the ordinary happened. The butler looked at the measuring device for a moment with a strange expression on his face. "Could it be broken?" "Young master, could you look at your elemental affinities and see the values?" The elemental affinities were a hidden stat that was only unlocked after the first class. Roland shrugged and brought up his status screen. While thinking about his affinity, a window popped up. At Tier 1, only the basic 4 elements could be unlocked. There were more elements like lightning and gravity at higher tiers. "What?" All that he spoke out clearly, and everyone heard it. Adam looked at the orb and then to Roland, his brows furrowing. Visit novelbin.com for the latest updates. This is unprecedented. I must report this to the Lord. The other servants started whispering from the sides. He wasn't sure what was wrong. The books didn't say anything about people having 0 elemental affinity. He looked at his maid Martha. The woman had tears in her eyes for some reason. "He has no magic affinity. Doesn't that mean that he won't be able to get any of the Tier 2 mage classes?" One of the servants said, while another one tried to shut him up. "What? I have no magic talent. How could this be?"